There's now every indication that Joe Biden will be declared the victor over Donald Trump and projected as the 46th president of the United States. In addition, there's every indication now, based on the data, that Democrats will take control of the U.S. Senate with at least a 51 to 49 majority. How do we know this? Again, based on all the latest polling data that has come out, it becomes very clear now that a blue wave, a Democratic tsunami, is coming. And what I'd like to do over the next couple of minutes is I'd like to talk through some of the data that I've been looking at for the last couple of days, answer your questions through comments, through tweets. We're broadcasting to you live on HAPS TV, also a special edition of Quick Hits News. You can go to either hashtag or tweet and enter your questions, and we'll respond to that. But what I want to do is take you through some of the numbers that I've been looking at, and I want to start with what a lot of people are going to say is, well, wait a second, what about the margin of error? What about what happened with the Democrats and Hillary Clinton 4 years ago when Hillary Clinton was projected? Well, here's the thing. If you look at the race now, and let's just assume for argument's sake to start, that all the polling, everything that's out there right now about Joe Biden against Donald Trump is wrong. Even if you factor in the mistakes that the Democrats and that the polls made 4 years ago, even if you factor that in and subtract that from Joe Biden, do the calculations, Joe Biden still gets to more than 300 electoral votes. He still gets a landslide, even if you factor in the mistake, the error margin that the pollsters had 4 years ago. I want to start with what the national polls suggest right now. And again, national polls are not as relevant as state by state, but national will give you a trend. And right now, according to the latest Real Clear Politics trend, Joe Biden is up by 10 points, 51.6 to Donald Trump's 41.6. And what's particularly relevant is the margin in battleground states, where Joe Biden is averaging about a 5.5 to 6-point lead over Donald Trump in key battleground states. And the reason the battleground states are significant, and I'm going to read them off for you now. What I want to do is I'm going to put up the map right now. This is the map of what 2016 looked like. You've got the Donald Trump states in red, the Hillary Clinton states in blue. But take a look at this map as I read off these numbers. Ohio, which Donald Trump won in 2016, the latest Real Clear Politics average has Joe Biden slightly ahead by less than 1%. North Carolina, Biden up 3.2. Georgia, which Donald Trump won convincingly in 2016, he's only up by 0.4%. Florida, which Donald Trump won 4 years ago, Biden is ahead by 3.7. Pennsylvania, Biden plus 7. Wisconsin, Biden plus 6.3. Arizona, Biden plus 2.7. Michigan, Biden plus 7. Iowa, Biden plus 1.2. Again, these are all states that if you're looking at the map, you can see Donald Trump won those states. So you're looking at Donald Trump having to thread a needle that is becoming statistically nearly impossible based on the latest data sets. And again, even when you factor in the problems with the pollsters 4 years ago, to me it adds up as a Democratic wave, a tsunami is coming. Now, let's also take a look at some of the Senate races. And how do we get to the number in terms of Democrats taking control of the U.S. Senate? It's a 53 to 47 Republican lead right now. Democrats need a net gain of 4 in order to get to 51. And I'm going to argue that they actually probably need 5 because of the one race, which I'm pretty sure Democrats are going to lose. They hold the seat in Alabama. That is Doug Jones there on the left, Tommy Tuberville, the former Auburn football coach there on the right. Alabama is a very strong Republican state. All of the polling suggests that Tuberville is going to win this. So that would make the Democrats needing to pick up at least 5 wins, 5 seats currently held by Republicans in order to get the magic number they need to take control of the U.S. Senate. So how do we get to 5? Well, let's go through it. I'm going to take down the picture of Doug Jones and Tommy Tuberville, and let's start with Arizona. Now, this is a special election that features Mark Kelly, a former astronaut, husband of Gabby Giffords, member of Congress, Democrat who was shot and injured, of course, against Martha McSally. Martha McSally won a special election to fill John McCain's seat. This is essentially a special election. So what happens now is that if Kelly wins this, he would actually be seated perhaps in time to vote on the Amy Coney Barrett Supreme Court confirmation. All the polls suggest that Mark Kelly is ahead in Arizona by 9 to 10 points. And again, you couple that with Joe Biden being ahead of Donald Trump by 3, and that's why a lot of pollsters are looking at Arizona being a Democratic pickup. Let's lose Arizona. And now let's pick up. Let's go to Colorado. Now, Colorado is an interesting race. It features Cory Gardner. He's there on the right against John Hickenlooper. John Hickenlooper was a Democratic governor for 2 terms in Colorado, still quite popular. Cory Gardner is essentially running for his first reelection as U.S. Senator. Colorado also suggests that Hickenlooper is up by 9 or 10 points. Again, this is another race where pollsters suggest it's almost every indication that Democrats are going to pick up this seat currently held by a Republican, so that gets you to 2 pickups. Let's lose Colorado. Let's put up a notifier so everybody can see what it is we're talking about here tonight. Push the program. If I can get this to work. There we go. Now, we just talked about Colorado. Let's talk about, then we've got to, so we're up to 2 net gain for Democrats based on the Senate seats that are Democrats plus 9 or 10. Let's go to Iowa. This one's a little bit closer, but again, here you have a Republican seat held by Joni Ernst. She is there on the right. And our Democratic challenger is something of a newbie in all of this. She is a real estate executive by the name of Teresa Greenfield. Teresa Greenfield has never essentially been a politician before. She did run for Congress back in 2018, but her bid ended after a campaign manager admitted falsifying some of the signatures that was required. So that didn't go anywhere. But again, she is running against Joni Ernst, and according to the latest polls, she's now up perhaps 5 to 6 points against Joni Ernst. So if that's another Democratic pickup, and again, this is outside the margin of error for the polls, you're looking at now Democrats getting a +3. So how did they get to their +4? Well, let's drop Iowa and put up, once after Iowa, let's go to Maine. Now, this is a fascinating one because this is Susan Collins against a woman by the name of Sarah Gideon. Sarah Gideon on the left, she is the Speaker of the House in the Maine General Assembly. Susan Collins has been a senator for, I think, 4 terms. And in each of the last several races, Susan Collins has actually increased her margin of victory. And in fact, 6 years ago when she won with 70% of the vote. And so how is it that Susan Collins could be in such trouble? Well, a lot of people say that Maine has become increasingly more Democratic. It's a state that is trending towards Joe Biden by 9 or 10 points, again, match up against Donald Trump. And a lot of people in Maine who hold Susan Collins accountable for her vote in favor of Judge Brett Kavanaugh, which was a very divisive issue 2 years ago. So there's a lot of thinking there that Susan Collins, both because she is seen as sort of the old guard, perhaps too squishy on key issues that centrists, Democratic progressives care about, particularly in Maine, such as abortion rights, that therefore Susan Collins is in trouble. And you add to that the fact that Sarah Gideon has raised tens of millions of dollars and is matching Susan Collins dollar for dollar, and that's why Sarah Gideon is up by 5 or 6 points. So we're now up to 4, a net +4 if all of this holds up on election night. So let's go from Maine to North Carolina. This is one of the most, I think, interesting races in the country. And let's actually get rid of Susan Collins. Sorry about that. Sorry. Let me get rid of the Susan Collins photo if I can figure out what I did with it. Okay, and let's go back to North Carolina. Now, let me get my notes just because I want to be sure, absolutely be sure on this one. So North Carolina features Republican incumbent Tom Tillis, there, bottom screen on the right, against Cal Cunningham. Cal Cunningham, the Democratic challenger. A couple of weeks ago, there were allegations that Cal Cunningham had an extramarital affair. He admitted to sending inappropriate texts with a woman. He has not admitted to the affair, but the polling suggests that this had virtually no impact, that Cunningham is still up by 9 or 10 points according to statewide polls. Tom Tillis was infected with COVID-19 at the president's Rose Garden event for Amy Coney Barrett a week ago. That has hurt him. And in addition, what's been so interesting about the polling is that a lot of people in North Carolina, the majority of the pollsters, majority of respondents in North Carolina have said that they believe that the Amy Coney Barrett confirmation should not go through. Majority believe that they should wait on the confirmation hearing until the election is over. So that goes in Cal Cunningham's favor. By the way, one sort of thing that was bizarre and interesting about the poll is that Cal Cunningham's standing among men after the allegations of the affair came out. Among men, his numbers actually ticked up a little bit in North Carolina. Among women, they ticked down slightly. But again, there you have Cal Cunningham beating Tom Tillis, according to the latest data in North Carolina, by 10 points. That's your 5 right there. Now, you could say, well, the Democrats only need, they need a +4. There's a possibility that they may lose, let's say, in Michigan. Well, and that's also a possibility. Let's take a look at the Michigan race. I'll put up the picture here if I can grab that. I got to lose Cunningham and Tillis from North Carolina. Hold on one sec. Let's go to Michigan. Okay. So, sorry. Where's my Michigan? Michigan. Why does it not pop it up? There we go. Well, Michigan's not going to pop up for me. Well, I'll just tell you about Michigan. Well, there it is. All right. So there we have Michigan. Now, a lot of people may sort of look at this and say, okay, well, Michigan should be a Democratic state. It's held by a current Democratic senator. Hold on one sec. Let me just pull up my data, make sure I got the exact thing here for you. Make sure. Okay. So you have a lots of paper. Peters versus James. James is the Republican nominee there on the bottom right. Senator Peters is the incumbent, who, according to the polls, is up by 2 or 3 points. James ran against Debbie Stabenow in the 2018 midterm elections. He fell short, but he gained enough traction to lead his party in the 2020 Senate race to win the primary. And a recent New York Times Siena College poll put the race within about 2 or 3 points. Again, Peters slightly ahead of James, the Democrats slightly ahead. I suppose this is a pickup in Michigan, where currently Democrat held seat that could go Republican. But again, it's close enough, and Democrats have a financial edge in Michigan. And oh, by the way, if you then look at, well, what about the Trump effect in Michigan? Well, Joe Biden, as I mentioned, is up 7 or 8 points in the state of Michigan, a state that Donald Trump won. So the Democrats are feeling very confident about being able to protect a place like Michigan. So look, that's the basic numbers on how I get to the math of the Democrats taking control of the U.S. Senate with 51 to 49. And again, if you look at the battleground numbers in terms of Donald Trump, I believe that is how we get to a Democratic wave, a Democratic tsunami coming in and sweeping Donald Trump out of office and bringing Joe Biden in. Let's get to some of your comments, because we've got, 40 live chats right now. And let's see. Let's start with, what about South Carolina, says Mark Goldman. Excuse me. Well, Mark Goldman, let's talk about South Carolina, because South Carolina is where Lindsey Graham is facing the leader of the Republican Party. Let's get rid of, sorry for the glasses here. Let's get rid of Michigan and put in South Carolina. Okay. South Carolina. Jamie Harrison. I got to lose. Sorry. Got to lose Michigan. All right, so there's Jamie Harrison against Lindsey Graham. Now, this has been an interesting race because Jamie Harrison has raised more money, $60 million, more money than any Senate race in U.S. history. That's right. In South Carolina, where it's not as expensive to run Senate races as it is, say, in New York or California, Massachusetts, Jamie Harrison, as the leader of the Democratic Party, has raised $60 million. Lindsey Graham was in a neck-and-neck race until just a few days ago. The latest polling suggests that Graham is now up to perhaps +5 in South Carolina. And one of the reasons is because remember how we were talking about in a place like North Carolina, where a lot of voters believe that, a majority of the voters believe that the Amy Coney Barrett confirmation should wait until after the election. In South Carolina, it's actually the reverse. And so with Lindsey Graham taking very high profile as the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, and his sort of pushing forward the Amy Coney Barrett nomination, the theory is that in South Carolina, that's actually reminded some Republicans of something that they want and has given Lindsey Graham something of a boost. Lindsey Graham has also been helped by starting to put money in behind his television ads. He got off to a little bit of a later start than Jamie Harrison because he hadn't raised as much as Jamie Harrison. Lindsey Graham is now starting to catch up, and the theory is that Lindsey Graham is now 4 or 5 points ahead. However, because that race is so close, it has electrified a number of Democratic fundraisers and donors and certainly voters, and so a lot of people are keeping a very close watch on what may happen in South Carolina. Now, $60 million. He has 3 weeks, says Paul. That's right, $60 million, and Jamie Harrison has 3 weeks to spend it. Now, one of the things to keep in mind about South Carolina, and we mentioned sort of ad rates, again, are not as expensive. So there's actually a limited number of ads you can buy, even if you were to advertise, every hour on television stations in Charleston and Columbia, South Carolina, there's only sort of a limit in terms of how much inventory you can actually fill. But what $60 million gets you in South Carolina is, never mind just the television ads, it gets you an incredible ground organization, people going door to door, people making sure that there are flyers and bumper stickers and road signs, and that there's plenty of call voting banks where people can make sure that you reach all the different voters you're trying to reach. So that's where $60 million gets us. What are we watching, says Love Fidentist, I think it is. What are we watching? Well, we're watching right now on the screen. We're looking at the South Carolina Senate race that we're talking about. What you're watching live is a HAPS TV special report. I'm David Schuster in Lebanon, Connecticut, and this is a special report through Quick Hits TV. I just wanted to go through some of the data that I found that was so interesting in terms of where the data suggests and why I think so many people are now coming around to the idea that Joe Biden is headed towards a landslide in terms of the Electoral College, and the Democrats are looking at taking control of the U.S. Senate with at least a 51-49 majority. Anthony is writing, is Mississippi or Georgia on the table for Democrats? Mississippi is not. Georgia gets interesting because of the way they do the primaries in Georgia. It's essentially like an open primary, and the top two vote getters square off. So there is some theory in Georgia that Georgia will have essentially the Republicans will not keep Georgia, at least on November the 3rd, that this will be delayed by another several weeks until they have essentially the runoff election. And you can imagine what happens if Democrats believe suddenly that they've got a chance at taking control of the Senate or adding to their control, and they can put a lot of money up behind against Kelly Loeffler in Georgia, who is extremely unpopular and has, I think, something like a 99% record in terms of voting with Donald Trump. What about Texas? That's another state John Cornyn is expected to hold on to a seat, although it is close. And Donald Trump, there's some polls in terms of Biden in Texas that suggest he's perhaps, even with Donald Trump or maybe a point or two ahead. Most Democrats will tell you they do not expect that the Democrats will carry and beat John Cornyn in the Senate race, although they think there's still an outside shot that perhaps there's a chance that Joe Biden will beat Donald Trump in Texas, and then you're talking about a landslide of epic proportions. All right, let's talk about, let's get some more of your questions from Marcia Stone. Thank you, much appreciated. You're welcome, Marcia. Good to have you on board. Why do you peg everyone as this or that? I'm not exactly sure, Hero Fishing, what you're talking about. Is Kanye West and Rocky a wild card in sub-states? That's from Julia Bonilla, and the answer to that is no. Kanye West is not a factor in any states. He's on the ballot in a couple of states, but he is not a factor according to all the polling. He is something of an anomaly, I suppose, in terms of how he might have any sort of impact, and I suppose something of a novelty, but at least based on the latest data, he is not having any sort of impact whatsoever. Let's take a look at some more of your questions. We got some hidden, old, and some of these are being hidden, so let's go some of the older comments that we had from a few minutes ago. By the way, what do you think of the HAPS technology? It's pretty cool, right? All I'm doing is basically on my computer, and it syncs up with all my various social media, and so that's how we're able to get through and do these sort of things. By the way, if you're interested in what we're doing now, take a look at Quick Hits News. That's the show that we publish every day at about 5 o'clock or so. This features a roundtable of journalists talking about news of the day. We go through a little bit of politics, but we also talk about the latest in COVID-19. And by the way, here is the latest in COVID-19 today. We just passed 215,500 total deaths in the United States. And the number of infections over the past 24 hours was 45,000 compared to 2 weeks ago. That's an increase of 19%. And it's not just in the United States where we're having issues with COVID-19 and a spike. Europe is seeing some record numbers as well. Germany, Russia, they just set records in terms of daily new infections. They're considering new lockdowns in France, in Italy, in Spain, and in the UK, where they've already imposed lockdowns, closing down pubs early. So COVID-19, unfortunately, is roaring along in a second wave. Let's get to some more of your questions. And thanks to everybody who's joining on the live look. We've got Davis Williams, how we look in South Carolina for Democrats. Well, let's go back and put the picture up of Jamie Harrison and Lindsey Graham, because we were just talking about South Carolina. And again, if anybody's just joining us, you're looking at a live show of sorts that we're doing over HAPS TV through Quick Hits News, where we're just talking about some of the data that I'm looking at and that I find interesting. In South Carolina, the data had suggested that Jamie Harrison, who's the leader of the Democratic Party down there, was even with Lindsey Graham as of a couple days ago. Over the past few days, some of the state polls have suggested Lindsey Graham has jumped out to about a 4 or 5% lead. You'll note that over the past week or two, Lindsey Graham has made a concerted effort in all of his appearances on Fox News to ask for money, to raise money. He's now starting to spend some of that money on advertising. He had waited a bit. He was behind Jamie Harrison. So between Lindsey Graham now up on the air in a very sort of intense level in South Carolina, and polls which suggest that the push forward of Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court happening now, right before the election, that's actually a popular position in South Carolina among the majority of voters there. And you have Lindsey Graham, who's the chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee, so he's getting a lot of attention for that. So between that, that's how people seem to suggest that Lindsey Graham may have made up 5 or 6 points over the last couple of days. Are the positive spike numbers due to more tests per capita? This is from Blue Streak, who was asking about the COVID numbers that we were mentioning, that I mentioned a few minutes ago. Excuse me. It's not due to more tests per capita. When you account for there are more tests per capita now, say, compared to April, May, June, but there are not more tests per capita now compared to 2 weeks ago. And that's why we go to great lengths to try to say, okay, well, how do the numbers now compare to 2 weeks ago when the number of tests were roughly the same? It's the same way in Europe. And so that's why there's such great concern about a rise in COVID in Europe and a second wave, and how they're able to say with some certainty there is a second wave. Now, the upside with all this is that the number of deaths from COVID-19, even in the United States, is down about 6 or 7 points compared to 2 weeks ago. So clearly, the United States and the rest of the world, and that holds true for the rest of the world as well, clearly we're getting better at treating people with COVID-19, that the medications, the drug cocktails, the steroid combination, for example, that Donald Trump has had, clearly that's helping and that's providing better outcomes in terms of mortality. You're not seeing as many people actually die from COVID-19, but the flip side of that, of course, is that more people still, though, are getting sick now than were getting sick 2 weeks ago. Okay, let's go to some more of your comments. It is all electoral. That is what we get from Saba something or other. Sorry, even with my glasses, I can't tell what your name is. It's all electoral. That's true. 270 is the magic number. You need 270 electoral votes to win. And let's put up the electoral map from 2016. And I love playing with this thing because it gets to, keep in mind, Donald Trump won with 300 and some votes to Hillary Clinton's 232. Donald Trump, in order to win, he can afford to give up, let's say, a Wisconsin and a Michigan or a Pennsylvania. He can't afford to give up Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Florida, Iowa, all states, Arizona, all states that he won in 2016, but states where right now he's losing, and he's losing significantly. And we can go through the numbers again. Ohio, Biden, Biden. Ohio's a toss-up by all accounts. Biden 0.6, but Ohio was not close. Donald Trump crushed Hillary Clinton. I believe it was 6 or 7 points, at least in 2016. So the fact that race is close, that's when the Democrats, I think a few months ago, probably had written off and said, well, we'll just sacrifice Ohio. But in fact, now they're starting to put money in there. Joe Biden is making campaign appearances in Ohio because they see a possibility of actually winning Ohio. North Carolina, Biden plus 3.2. Georgia should not be close for Republicans. Donald Trump is up by less than half a percentage point. Florida, Biden 3.7. Pennsylvania, this is the one that could literally kill Republicans. And that is Pennsylvania, Biden 7.0. Pennsylvania does something very interesting on election night, which I think will factor into this whole sort of perception of a media narrative that Joe Biden has won 3 weeks from now. The reason is Pennsylvania counts their early ballots before Election Day. In other words, any ballot that is submitted between now and Election Day, it gets tabulated, and then it gets added to the actual numbers of people who go in and vote on November the 3rd. So whereas some states, you might have a 60-40 split Donald Trump supporter to Joe Biden supporter based on who actually goes to the precincts and votes. And you might have a 65-35 or 60-40 Joe Biden to Donald Trump split in terms of people who vote early. So it can be a little bit confusing in some states if you look at just the people who show up on Election Day, but not in Pennsylvania. In Pennsylvania, where they count all of the votes, all of the absentee ballots, everything in advance, and they add that to the number that are counted on Election Day. And so you have pretty good numbers that will come in from Pennsylvania. And if Donald Trump loses Pennsylvania, which it looks like right now he's down by 7 points, and that is outside any sort of margin of error, and even if you account for the statistical significance of what happened 4 years ago with the pollsters getting it wrong, Joe Biden would still win Pennsylvania. If Donald Trump loses Pennsylvania, this race is essentially over. It's hard to find a path for Donald Trump to get to 270 if he can't get a victory in Pennsylvania. And you couple Pennsylvania with, say, if he loses Wisconsin and Michigan, then it's just a matter of how bad the damage is going to be and what sort of impact happens down ballot in congressional races where Democrats already have a very comfortable margin in terms of control of the House. And again, are looking at perhaps a pickup of at least 4 or 5 Senate seats, which would give them a 51-49 control of the chamber. A couple of people have pointed out, well, wait a second, what about, do the Democrats really need 4? If they win the presidency, don't they only need a net pickup of 3? Because right now it's 53-47. And yes, that's true. Whichever party holds the White House, the vice president essentially becomes the tie-breaking vote in the Senate. So if, in fact, this were to be a 50-50 split and Joe Biden were to win, then yes, technically, and it's happened in the past, then the president's party would essentially be in control of the Senate. You wouldn't have 2 majority leaders. It would be the Democratic majority leader under this scenario who would determine what gets to the floor, what gets voted on. But it gets a little trickier. Let's talk about... Travis Wilson says we tabulate early votes at 5 p.m. in my county in North Carolina. Look, North Carolina is another good example where we should have some pretty clear results early on election night in terms of what the results are. So that's a good point. Everybody vote for Kanye, says Professor Drip 50. Okay, vote for Kanye. Hero depends on how sketchy it is. I'm not quite sure, Dr. F, what you're talking about there. Let's see. Hero Fishing says, can you guys just take in an L this time and just get it back next election? Take an L. I think that's a reference to some Republicans, the number of Republicans who have... Look, there are plenty of Republicans who have crossed over. The whole Lincoln Project was funded in part by Democrats and Republicans who supported George W. Bush and worked for him, who felt that Donald Trump is bad for the Republican Party, so they're working to try to get Joe Biden elected. That's what the Lincoln Group and all those Lincoln Project and all those incredible killer ads are. That's funded by a lot of Republicans. So there are some Republicans who are saying, let's get rid of Donald Trump, let's take the loss, and let's rebuild the party once Donald Trump is gone. Let's see. I'll send 2 free... Yeezy to everyone who's voting for Kanye. Good one. He will not win, and that's that. I believe you're talking 9 mustache. He will not win, and that's that. I think you're talking perhaps about Donald Trump, and I think you're right. I think all the pollsters, and that's why you're starting to see a lot of the media talk about landslide, tsunamis, and all the rest. What's your opinion on Biden's mental acuity, says the doctor. Well, doctor, here's my opinion on Biden's mental acuity. It's irrelevant. If you ask most Democrats, they would take Joe Biden, even if he's senile or has Alzheimer's, over Donald Trump, who has all of his faculties or all of his cognitive abilities right now, simply because of the judgment problems that Democrats have with Donald Trump. I mean, we hear people say, oh, Joe Biden is senile. He's got problems. He doesn't, Joe Biden doesn't understand. He's got Alzheimer's. He's too old. He's confused. Democrats don't care. They'll take a confused Joe Biden over a very cunning Donald Trump any day. And that's why I think this whole sort of issue about Joe Biden's health is largely irrelevant. But look, it's a good question. Does Joe Biden have some cognitive decline? I covered Joe Biden for many years. I got to meet him several times in Washington, D.C. He was very sharp, but he's never been particularly great in debates. And so, he's always been sort of sometimes loose-lipped and sometimes say things that are inappropriate. I'm not sure he's doing that much more now, although I suppose you have to be somewhat suspicious given the fact that, Joe Biden has not sat down for the sort of hard-hitting interviews and repeat press conferences that Donald Trump has, frankly. So there's some theory that Joe Biden's campaign is simply trying to protect him and not let him out there and try to keep the gaffes minimized if possible. Mr. DeWill, do the American people really have a say-so? 340 million people, and these are the 2 that we have to choose. My colleague Tal Heinrich made the point on Quick Hits News today that at this point in an election, it's a choice between somebody who's terrible and somebody who's just And that's, I think that's the impact of so much media and advertising and negative ads and attacks and how long the campaign season usually goes. If you look at most U.S. elections over the last 30 or 40 years, you will find that even the winner rarely has an approval rating or has the support of more than 53, 54% of the electorate. And that's because there's a sizable portion which is conditioned to believe that these are two terrible choices that we have, that either one of them is not so good. But the fact of the matter is there are clear policy differences between Joe Biden and between Donald Trump. If the public had more awareness of his senility, he would tank, says the doctor. I don't think so. Again, I get back to this idea that the public, most people who are voting are not voting because they think that Joe Biden is in Mensa or because he's got the mental acuity of somebody who's in their 20s. They're voting to get rid of Donald Trump. This is what happens in U.S. elections, and political scientists will tell you this until they're blue in the face, that almost always when an incumbent is running for the presidency, it is a referendum on those first 4 years. It is a referendum on the incumbent. It doesn't really matter whether you like or dislike the challenger. Now, there is an exception to that, as has been pointed out by some of you online, and that is Mitt Romney against Barack Obama in 2012. Obama had some pretty strong negatives going his direction, so his campaign decided, well, let's make this race about Mitt Romney, and Mitt Romney being out of touch and having the car elevators and all the wealth that made him not very appealing to working class, and it worked. And they were able to paint Mitt Romney as such a terrible person and so out of touch that became essentially a key point of the election. And it wasn't so much of a referendum on Barack Obama. But for the most part, over the last 30 or 4 years, whenever it's an incumbent running for re-election, it is always a race about the incumbent. It's a referendum on the incumbent. And that's why you see Joe Biden not making as many media appearances, and his campaign certainly trying to limit his gaffes and mistakes and let this be a race about Donald Trump. We've got almost 30 minutes. We're going to end this in just a second. I voted by mail and I can't locate my ballot, says Rock. Sorry about that. The lack of public unscripted town hall type Biden appearances is unprecedented during the campaign season. Well, doctor, you're right, but COVID-19 is also unprecedented and everything has changed. And the fact of the matter is, as I just said, it doesn't really matter so much whether Joe Biden does a lot of town halls or not. This is a referendum on Donald Trump, and Donald Trump is losing. And when you have an approval rating that barely gets into 40%, and you have national polls which show that your Democratic opponent is up by plus 10, that's why you have so many people talking about a tsunami. So that's it. 3 weeks. A lot of folks, look, I've already heard from a lot of people who voted early. Some 11 million people have already voted. And the one thing that they will tell you is they say, it makes them feel good, regardless of who they're voting for. When you vote, it makes you feel good. So for everybody who's got an opportunity to vote early or to vote on election day, take it from me. When you cast that ballot, no matter who you vote for, you're participating in the process. You're a civic-minded, civic-engaged American. It'll make you feel good. So 3 weeks from tonight, this will all be over. And I'm telling you, based on the data and even based on the margins of errors, I think the data is convincing, and at least convinces me, who's been covering this stuff for 30 years, that on November the 3rd, perhaps in the 10 o'clock hour, the hour that we're in now, I believe the Associated Press, Reuters news agency, and all the networks will have all the data and all the numbers they need to declare that Joe Biden has won, and then he will be the 46th president of the United States, and that sometime around perhaps 1 or 2 in the morning, the same networks and wire services will declare that Democrats have won enough seats to take control of the U.S. Senate come January 2020 when the next session of Congress begins. We'll see. I'm David Schuster. Thanks for watching.